Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Control Report Podcast, episode 147. Benjamin Yoder here today to talk to you about a lot of video games, actually. We have quite a few news stories here, and then I also started playing a few games. I unfortunately haven't made any progress on Final Fantasy XIV or Xenoblade Chronicles X. I kind of put those aside when I was doing a Tokadol video stuff. And then when I came back to start playing games again, I got distracted by other things. So I think I'll probably get back to Final Fantasy XIV sooner rather than later. Xenoblade Chronicles X, I'm a little uncertain how that's going to fall into places right now. I think the big problem with those two games is they're occupying a very similar space of like big, long, grindy RPGs that need me to kind of just like poke at them every once in a while for hundreds of hours. So while they both exist in that kind of, play space for me, I really wonder how much progress I'm going to make. But that's not an issue I'm dealing with right now. I've got some other things going on, particularly like everybody else in the world. I went ahead and started up Animal Crossing New Horizons. So I'm in a little bit late. I had some trouble with the delivery. Unsurprisingly, in this whole coronavirus quarantine thing going on, deliveries are a little finicky at the moment. But I did finally get my copy, and I put, as of today that I'm talking, Sunday, I put 2 days in, so probably about, I'd say, 3 to 5 hours between those 2 days, and I'm liking it. I am really enjoying the early experience of that game. If you don't know much about how I feel about Animal Crossing, I've played all of them. I've even played Amiibo Festival. That's a lie. I haven't played Happy Home Designer. I did miss that one, but I did play Amiibo Festival, the one true Animal Crossing game. And but yeah, so I'm kind of between Animal Crossing, Wild World, City Folk, and New Leaf. I kind of got a little tired of the style. Even New Leaf, I was really on the edge of whether or not I wanted to get it. The mayor stuff in that game was very promising to me, and so I did eventually decide to buy it. And I was a little underwhelmed by what that game had to offer, unfortunately. But this game, at least up front, the whole like building your own deserted island stuff and, the crafting mechanics and things like that have really, at least to me, given the game a pretty different feel from a typical Animal Crossing. It gives you a lot of very distinct objectives early on that isn't like you just showed up in town and being like, oh, yo, people who live here, let me go work with Tom Nook for a bit, and then you go work with Tom Nook, which you're still doing that here. But you have, you're building the museum, you're building the shop from like scratch. So, the museum was empty in the previous games, but in this case, you're like literally going around and be like, I'm going to set this museum up here, and we're gonna build a tent, and then we're gonna build the actual museum and store and stuff like that. So I do like that part of the game so far. The one thing I'm kind of uncertain of how I felt about it, but initially you're kind of locked to like a third of your island, and I wasn't even sure if that was intentional. You get to choose between like 4 different island designs when you start, and I was worried that the one I picked was like just very limiting early on. But it sounds like that might be standard. I asked Anthony; he said that was the case of his game too, and I think he said other people had it the same way. And there's actually like an objective at some point. They're like, "Hey, go across the river to do this next thing." So it seems very likely that there's no instance you could get out of that tiny portion of the island, no matter what design you choose. But yeah, so you're locked to like a third of the island. So it does feel a little limiting on the first day, especially as you're kind of grappling with materials and making sure you have enough stone and stuff to build items. But, there's still a good 2 to 3 hours worth of stuff to do, which I feel like for Animal Crossing games, sometimes the first day you struggle to play more than an hour. It's been a long time since I've played the other ones, but yeah, it just feels a lot more objective oriented. You have a lot of clear goals, and there's a lot of there's like this whole system called the Nook Miles system, where you basically earn currency for doing certain objectives. A lot of these are like micro objectives. They're like plant 3 trees, or or cut a tree down and stuff like that, and then you get miles for that. And you can kind of start unlocking features using those mileage points. And the more you play in a day, the less of those miles you can really accrue. I mean, you can continue to play the game and just continue to get miles, but it seems like the amount you're earning early on very heavily starts to like flatten out. And then so I think the first micro objectives for each day always give you like 2 times the number of tickets you normally would, but every objective after that is just the normal amount you get back. So they kind of have like this, like, hey, if you play, you can keep playing if you really want to, but you're kind of, being gated to some extent. So yeah, I do like that part of it, but sometimes it can feel a little limiting where it's like I just kind of ran out of things to do on the first day after like 2 or 3 hours. And, if you wanted to play the game longer than that, then I feel like that'd be kind of disappointing. But, if those games are really meant to be played on a, 2 to 3, or I'd say maybe even closer to like an hour a day with the older ones. I don't know if, it's different for this one, but like you're not really tended to spend a ton of time on it all at once. So it's all about kind of, fitting it into your daily lifestyle and things like that. So day 2 of 2, I've played Animal Crossing successfully, but we'll see how much I keep up with it. If you know anything about how I play games, I typically move on from things pretty quickly. I mean, I beat them. Well, in the case of Animal Crossing, there isn't really a beat state. But I spend a good chunk of time with games, and then once I feel pretty satisfied with them, I tend to move on. So, there's people who are still playing New Leaf 7 years later, and I've never been that kind of person. But we'll see. I'll probably at least play it for a couple weeks at the very least. So I also ended up playing, and I don't know if this is the full name or not, but the English part of the name is Metal and Lace 2. It might be Ningou Tsukai 2. I don't know what that means. That might literally just mean metal and lace. Don't know. That doesn't look like metal and lace to me, but I'm not going to translate that. And this is the first PC 98 game that I really sat down and played. So the problem I've had with my NEC PC 98, which if you don't know is like old Japanese computer that I brought over from Japan when I came back, is basically just a Windows PC, and it's running like DOS on it. And so I need to install games on here, but I haven't looked into how to do that still. But Metal and Lace 2 can run off the floppy disks. So I don't know if you can even install it, but I don't know anything about these old PCs at all. But I was able to get it to run off floppy disks, and it's basically a fighting game. It's an erotic fighting game. It has graphic scenes in it, but you can basically turn those scenes off. And then just play it like a normal fighting game. And it is a fighting game. That's about all I can really say about it. It's a pretty typical Street Fighter style combo kind of stuff. One-on-one fighter. You basically are these girls who have these robots that they as companions that fight for them. And there's only about 5 characters by default. Which is a pretty small roster, but they all have very distinct play styles. One is like very much like a grappler kind of character. One has a lot of I don't know how you would describe it. It's like this weird samurai robot with no legs. So it has like it's almost like a weapon-based fighter in that one character specific instance versus everybody else who just like punches things. And then there's very much like the 2 kind of, I guess you'd call like reuse of the game. They're kind of have a projectile attack as well as some like uppercut style attacks and things like that. And I think that's then there's one that's like very I guess you'd call it like movement and combo based. She can like throw her body forward and like she'll take damage if she doesn't hit anybody. So if you throw your body forward and smack into the ground, you actually hurt yourself. And then you also can do like these little triple hit combos and things like that. And she also has like an uppercut. So yeah, it's basically just a pretty typical fighting game. But because it's such a small roster, I feel like it is important that a lot of those characters feel very different. And they do. There's not really a lot of overlap between them, which I think is fine. There's actually 2 additional characters in it as well. Lucifer, and I think the other one's like Caviar or something like that. Lucifer is the final boss of the game. And then Caviar, it sounds like, is a secret character that you have to beat after you unlock Lucifer. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, I can't unlock those 2 characters. The reason being is because, again, I'm not super familiar with old PCs, but in this case, basically, I have 2 floppy drives on this PC, and in floppy drive 1, I have like I assume like a boot disk with like core game files on it and stuff. And then in floppy drive 2, I guess is like the content disk maybe. So you basically, in the slot 2, you put in disk 1, which then you can actually play the game using disc 1. But whenever a cutscene plays, you need to pop it out, or the major cutscenes play, you need to pop it out and put disc 2 in, which houses the cutscenes. And all the characters ending cutscenes work for me except for the main character. And to unlock Lucifer, you need to beat the game with all 5 characters. And I think, and I did do that, but I think because I can't trigger the final cutscene with this current floppy disk I have, I actually can't unlock Lucifer. And then you have to beat the story mode with Lucifer without continuing to unlock Caviar or whatever her name is. So yeah, but like I said, there is an erotic element to it. I checked it out the first time just to see if there's anything to it, and it's basically just in between battles you get some basically sex scenes kind of thing, a lot of bondage style stuff. But I you turn graphic scenes off and it basically plays like a normal fighting game at that point. There's no real reason to need to play this game for any reason as far as I can tell. But I was happy to get something right on this PC98, and then hopefully in the future we'll find some more interesting games. And it wasn't a bad fighting game. It just was, kind of, it was perfectly fine. I actually played it using a Hudson Soft Joy-Con controller for the MSX controller that I'm using on a PC98. So I'm not using it. It's not, this PC98 is not an MSX. But it's actually a 4-button game. So I think what's happening in this game is if you use a controller, it basically does a timing-based kind of thing. So the longer you hold the button, it considers it like a heart attack if you hold it longer. But if you tap it, it's a light attack. But you can play on the keyboard and do a 4-button layout that way. I'm assuming there are 4-button controllers. I have not really looked into these types of controllers at all. I don't know how common it is to need 4-button controllers. I assume for fighting games that might be pretty common at the very least. But yeah, so I played with just the Joy card for now. I might mess around with the keyboard controls at some point. But until it becomes like a very obvious thing that I will need a more than just a 2-button controller, I'll probably just stick with the 2-button and the keyboard for now. So I do have about 6 other PC98 games. I really need to reach out to Vink. I was kind of on hold because I wasn't really sure with like all the coronavirus stuff going on if that would affect my job at all. It sounds like it probably will not, based off what I'm hearing lately. So I might move forward on reaching out to him, seeing what kind of games he has. Because the weird thing about buying PC98 games is it doesn't seem very easy to find specific games. You usually just kind of look at what's available on Yahoo Auctions Japan and pick from the pile of stuff that's currently listed. So yeah. But yeah, I did stream that game last week at the end of the Left Alive stream. So that's up on my YouTube channel as a separate thing. It's also up on the website. If you go look in the weekly video section, it's up in there as a stream. You also go to the stream section, you'll find it in there too. I also played through Metal Slug XX, which I believe is just Metal Slug 7, but this is like an enhanced port of it. Basically, I don't actually own Metal Slug XX. The friend that I played Overcooked with about a week ago, I don't remember if I mentioned this last time, I played Overcooked with him using SharePlay, which is basically Sony's whole thing where they stream somebody's game to your PS4, and then you get connected as like a remote local player. So like the PS4 thinks I'm a local player playing the game, but I'm actually remotely viewing a stream and playing it that way. And that worked pretty well for Overcooked. There's definitely a noticeable delay, but it's playable. Like, in the situation of Overcooked's a game without online play, it's a perfectly good way to go ahead and play that game. However, Metal Slug XX, I definitely noticed the lag a lot more, particularly because, it is a more timing-based game. I mean, it's not like a hardcore platformer, but there are jumps in that game, and that game's like built for... Well, actually, it's like a 2008 game, so it probably was built for LCDs in some way. But I definitely, the delay, I definitely noticed quite a bit more. And there actually was a pretty bad bug where basically, if you don't know with SharePlay, they limit you to only an hour of playtime. You can continue playing, but you have to reconnect the stream connection. I don't know why they do this. It's a weird thing. I'm sure there's a reason for it. Maybe bandwidth reasons, but it mostly seems like just a silly inconvenience. So you pause the game, you disconnect the SharePlay, reconnect the SharePlay, bring everybody back in, and then you all play again. And for an hour at a time is not a terrible thing. Unfortunately, with Metal Slug Double X, the the second player actually loses all control of their character when you do that. So you essentially soft lock the game at that point because nobody can go anywhere. So you have to beat that game within an hour, which is not hard. I think we beat it in about 35 minutes to 40 minutes. We're just like rushing through the game essentially. But if you were like trying to go through and do like a no death run or something like that, probably wouldn't have gone very well. But admittedly, I would assume at that point, it you probably would be wanting to play something more local where you can have like a better reaction time and things like that. But I enjoyed it. I think the only thing, and I'm kind of split about it. In some ways, I think it's really cool that game is still using like the exact same aesthetic of like the old Metal Slug games. They're almost exactly the same animations if they aren't the same already. But in other ways, it's kind of like, well, it'd be nice if they if they did a little bit more. But it was fine. It's about what I expect from a Metal Slug game. Sit down, spend 30 to 40 minutes on it, be done with it, feel good about it. My friend that was doing it did want to do the trophy kind of stuff with it. I helped him with a couple things, but I don't think I have like a strong desire, especially with like that, the whole bug thing where you get, lose control after an hour. It seems kind of inconvenient. There's also a lot of weird decisions around like the trophy collecting stuff or like achievement stuff where it's like, oh, get all the POWs, but a lot of the POWs will like, if you free them on the edge of the screen, they'll just like walk off screen and stuff. It was a lot of just like really little small annoyances like that. You have to shoot everywhere in the background to find all the hidden POWs, and it's like, eh. But as a game, just playing through it, I thought it was pretty fun. And then finally, I did play a little bit more Little Witch Academia. My feelings on that game are greatly cratering very fast. I don't know if I talked about it last week. I think I did. But we kind of finished up our multiplayer stuff with Little Witch Academia. And in some ways, I think that stuff kind of killed my enthusiasm for the game. Mainly because I kind of got to see what the end game of that game looks like. And the fact that the stuff that you think would be interesting going forward in terms of the combat is basically completely irrelevant. Not only completely irrelevant, it is actually detrimental to look at it and focus on it and try to use it. You really just need to level up your spells. And like, that's something I'm definitely feeling at this part of the game already, because I did get one character to the maximum level during the multiplayer stuff, but I kind of set her aside and was like, okay, I'm going to play through the single player with just the characters I have that are actually appropriately leveled for this thing. But so the normal minions are fine right now, but the bosses are a pain in the butt unless you have like your spell stuff leveled up already and like you're using specific spells. Specific spells, just a highly upgraded one. And some of the bosses are just kind of annoying. I was doing like an ice dragon fight thing, and there's just like a very small window of which you can hurt it. And if you don't have the right spells equipped, like elemental spells equipped for that boss, I don't know what he was weak against, but I was only doing a little damage. And I'm playing a character who's kind of melee attack focused, so her spell damage is not great. Yeah, it was just kind of like, I don't know. Anyways, I think that game is fine for the most part, but I think seeing what that game becomes kind of made me a little bitter towards that game. I think it's a really wasted opportunity in terms of the combat part of that game, that they didn't do a better job mixing the melee combat and the spells. They're kind of two separate entities within that battle system, and they spent so much time. Well, I don't know how much time they actually spent, but they did differentiate a lot of the characters based off their melee combos, and to have that kind of stuff become completely irrelevant is really disappointing to me. To the point that, basically what was happening, I'm pretty sure I talked about this last week, we'd walk into a room, cast a bunch of spells, the room would blow up basically, and we move on to the next room, do the exact same thing over and over again. And it's just not fun. Still enjoying the style of the game though, but I think I am very much just going to do a direct line of sight to the end of that game and just try not to spend too much time lingering on it much more. So yeah. And that's pretty much it for stuff I've been playing. Yeah, I feel like I would like to get back to Xenoblade Chronicles X soon, but I might also just play something that's like fairly short soon. I kind of want to play another like short retro style game. I think Dore Mi Fantasy and Metal and Lace 2 kind of tipped me in the way of being like, oh, I beat these games quickly. What if I could beat more games quickly? So I don't know. I definitely have a lot of retro style games in my collection somewhere. I just have to look to see what I have, but we'll see if that actually happens. You know me, I'm ADD and will go anywhere. And play a bunch of different video games all the time, and I really should just focus on Little Witch Academia, finish that off, and then go back to Xenoblade Chronicles X or something like that. In terms of news this week, mainly going to focus on Nintendo Direct stuff. I did see that there was some thing about like a Fate cooking game, basically. If you don't know, basically the Fate anime, well, based off visual novel thing, Fate series, go Wikipedia it if you don't know what it is. They had like a cooking game, which I thought was pretty cute looking. I think apparently it was announced back in like late last year, and I just didn't see it. Probably because I was in Japan or not paying attention because I was going to Japan. So that, and I don't know anything about Fate really, but it looks kind of cute. I would like to see more gameplay of it because visually it looks pretty good. I just want to see what they're doing mechanically with that game. I never played that Sinner Kagura cooking game either. I don't know if I ever will. But the main focus for today is going to be Nintendo Direct stuff here. So if you don't know, there's a Nintendo Direct mini earlier this week. Kind of the highlights of that for me was the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. I believe it comes out on May 29th. And I'm not very excited to play Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Not because I think there's anything bad about it per se. I just, would rather focus on the Mollisoft games I haven't played yet, because I haven't played all of them. So, I'm more interested in the DS games I'm playing. But in saying that, I was actually very happy to see that they're actually allowing you to play the epilogue content. I don't know if it's even epilogue content, the new content or whatever, as like up front. So if you don't know, in what they kind of showed in this video was that the impression I'm getting, at least, is that the base game is going to be largely unchanged. It looks pretty faithful to what the game is, prettied up a bit, but it looks pretty dang close. It looks pretty much built off the Xenoblade Chronicles in a lot of ways. Like, some of the environments definitely feel very Wii-ish in some ways. The game still looks good, but I think you can definitely see the DNA of it being a Wii game, basically. And so they have a new part of the game that's going to basically take place on the Bionis Shoulder, which, if you don't know, is famously kind of a portion of the game, a very large section of the game, actually, that was cut. It's like the largest area in the game, I think, and it's still left in the game, and it's unfinished. And it's in like some of the trailers and stuff, and I think it even appears in the ending cutscene of the game too. But basically, they didn't finish this area; they cut it, and then so it looks like they're re-implementing it back into the game. And story-wise, it's probably going to. And I'm going to get into a little bit. I'm going to try not to spoil much about Xenoblade Chronicles 2 here, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how these games connect here, just as a heads up. So Xenoblade Chronicles 2, if you don't know, basically kind of pulls some of the story stuff from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and tries to attach the two worlds together in a way that I think is actually, in my opinion, very detrimental to Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I think it kind of undermines that game's story in a lot of ways. It kind of, it's kind of weird because like Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is a very complete story on its own, in my opinion. And Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is like, hey, what if we added a bunch of stuff and say this happened in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, even though it really didn't happen in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. So this is their opportunity to go back and change those parts of the game to integrate with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I'm bitter about in some ways, but it's fine. The original Xenoblade Chronicles is there if I always ever want it. Same way that me being like, I prefer the graphics of the original Xenoblade Chronicles, but that game's still there if I want to play it, and I'm not going to play it again. So, so I forgot where I was at with this, but basically, so they're adding some new story stuff that's good. It seems like it's probably going to connect to Xenoblade Chronicles 2's story. It's called like Future Connection or something like that. And but that content that they're adding is actually playable from the beginning, without having to play through Xenoblade Chronicles 1, which got me very excited because like the biggest concern I was going to have was I get to play through this 70-hour RPG that I've already played 95% of, depending on what content they add or remove. So 60 to 70 hours is a big time to commit to something I've already played through. So I will definitely pick that game up day one, since I can play that content separately, and I will probably play that content as soon as I can, basically, at this point. And coming off the Torna video a few months ago, that Torna DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is pretty distinct on its own. Even though it's very much built off Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it has its own feel to the battle system. The world design is very, very different than Xenoblade Chronicles 2, in my opinion. They actually revamped the graphics engine too, but I don't assume that they're going to do this for this thing. So I'm kind of excited to see what this thing will be. From what I can tell, it basically has Shulk and Melia as the two main characters, and there's two little Nopon style characters too that are involved in this. So if the battle system is being reduced down or expanded, depending on how these characters interact, if it's reduced down to two characters, the Shulk and Melia, or if it's expanded to Shulk, Melia, and the two Nopons, that would be kind of interesting. I kind of hope they're trying to do something different with the battle system in that case. But that might be kind of a little weird to launch the definitive edition with this original battle system and then also include this other battle system on this extra content. But I'm excited to see what it turns out to be. I think seeing that it's being kind of sectioned off in its own little pocket of the game is encouraging for me, just because of how good Torna was, and I felt like Torna benefited a lot from being its own content rather than something slapped on top of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The other thing that I was very surprised by during this Nintendo Direct is they announced the new Clubhouse Games, which I thought was really weird. If you don't know, Clubhouse Games was a Nintendo DS game that had a bunch of card games and stuff, like board games and things like that, that you could play via like local Wi-Fi. I think there's actually some online elements as well to it. And I thought it was at the time, I think it reviewed pretty well. It was pretty substantial, but being based off things like Solitaire and things like that, it probably didn't like stand out nearly as much. It's like 2005, I think, is when it came out. So it's pretty early DS era. And I think at the time this was actually a very cool product because mobile phones were gaming devices, but they weren't exactly dedicated game devices, and the quality of the software on there was not always great. So having this one package that's just like a lot of really solid versions of a lot of these games on the DS to go was pretty cool, and having an online interaction too was pretty cool. I'm a little more confused by putting that out on the Switch in today's environment. I think it's pretty cool if you're gonna if they have I don't know if they specify anything, but they have if they had local multiplayer stuff or even online multiplayer stuff, that's pretty exciting. But for the portable card game experience, I feel like modern phones cover that base a lot better compared to phones back then. So I really don't know 100% who this is for, other than just people who want a good board game collection on the Wii, or card game collection as well. But there is some other stuff in there that actually is pulled from games like We Play. There's a shooting gallery mode. Tanks finally came back, like a new version of Tanks, which I think is really cool. If you don't know, We Play on the Nintendo Wii had this Tanks mini game, and people loved it back then. In a essentially a minigame collection that was about $10 because the game came with a Wii remote on its own. Most of those minigames were kind of to okay, but the Tanks one was always really good. And I think people at the time really asked for wanting more of that stuff, and it was always kind of a weird thing that they never released anything on WiiWare that was kind of like an expansion of it. So to see them finally bring Tanks back, I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, whether or not we need a Clubhouse Games today in this year of 2020, I don't know. But I'll be curious to see what it turns out to be. I don't know if they announced a release date or anything like that. But what a weird thing to bring back. Those are the kind of announcements that get me excited, because at no point would I tell you, hey, Clubhouse Games, 15 years later, coming back, baby. So the only way it could have been better if it was on an E3 stage and I don't know, Doug Bowser, all the Nintendo celebs are pretty much gone at this point. Doug Bowser came out on stage and was like, yo guys, Clubhouse Games. And then to hit a couple of these other smaller ones, Ninjala was shown off. I think this is the first time they showed a English release of Ninjala. This was a game that was showed off at Tokyo Game Show quite a few years ago. I think it was pretty shortly in the Switch's lifespan. It had a style that always kind of looked like, oh, they're trying to replicate Splatoon, but it's kind of like a melee action game. If I recall correctly, the gimmick of it was that you could jump on walls and stuff, and essentially walk on walls and fight people on walls and things like that. So you basically were changing the gravity in some ways. This is pulling some really old information on my head, so I don't know 100% sure if I'm being accurate or not. But I seem to recall it being that. It's free to play. I might check it out. I'm not super sure. I forget who is bringing it out to. I think was it Kanakawa Games. I'm providing you guys a great amount of information here. I mean, other than the fact that I saw it in that thing and be like, that game. I didn't exactly consume much information in the direct about it, but But yeah, I might check it out just to take a look at it. But yeah, it's a free to play game, so I'm gonna guess I won't spend a lot of time with it. I'd have to be very impressed with it, I think. We'll see. We'll see how much traction it gets. It definitely has a Splatoon kind of look, but maybe a bit off in a way that I think is maybe a little less appealing. But And they also announced that the Panzer Dragoon remake was out the day of the Direct. The physical version is not out yet. You can pre-order that, I think, at Limited Run Games for the US. I'm a bit on the fence about pre-ordering it. I do. So the reason I really want to buy that game more than anything probably is I like that Sega's doing something with their Saturn franchises. There are so many instances of Sega Genesis stuff coming out again, and that's cool. Like, cool, keep bringing out the Sega Genesis stuff. But like the Saturn in particular, less so the Dreamcast, don't really get a lot of loving from Sega a lot of times. At least direct game love. I mean, they've released garbage like toys and stuff all the time. Not garbage. They're fine. They're cute. If you want those are fine. I'm not telling you that your tastes are garbage, but you know, it's non-consequential stuff. It's just, you know, the same as probably how Mega Man fans felt when there's like a huge Mega Man drought. Yeah, they kept releasing Mega Man figures all the time. Mega Man X figures at least. But yeah, so like I'm interested in that they're re-releasing the Saturn thing, even though it's made from the ground up rather than, you know, being a port of the Saturn game. I'm interested in that. So I might pick it up. The only reason I'm really hesitant is I wasn't a big fan of the original Panzer Dragoon. I played it on Xbox. So I played Panzer Dragoon Orta. Amazing game. They actually, my Panzer Dragoon Orta video actually this week got an upkick in views because of the Panzer Dragoon remake. But yeah, Panzer Dragoon Orta, fantastic play. If you have an Xbox One, you can play that game. Go do it, please. I love that game. But in that game, at least in the original Xbox version, I assume it's in the Xbox One version as well because it's basically a port. You can play the original Panzer Dragoon in there too, and I didn't love it. It was fine. It wasn't bad. It just kind of was what it was, an on-rail shooter. And you know, after playing Orta to unlock that game, it's kind of a pretty big step back. I don't think it's a bad game though. Very, very good music, very good stylistically too. So replaying the original Panzer Dragoon is not something I really, really desire that much. But you know, again, supporting Sega doing something with their Saturn library finally. And I would like to see Panzer Dragoon, Zwei, I don't know, is that German? Zwei, the second game to come out. I'd love to see Panzer Dragoon Saga get re-released somehow. I would love to check those games out. So, you know, I might do it just so I can feel good about it. I know my one purchase doesn't change anything, but, you know, as I have been very fortunate to have a larger income, at least compared to, you know, 5 years ago, I've been trying to be a bit more considerate of games that I really want to support and buying those at launch. Because, you know, end up in, I say it again over and over again, the situation with like Freedom Wars, where I love Freedom Wars. I paid $5 for Freedom Wars, you know, and that's definitely a full retail game. And it feels a little bad to be like, that's a great game. You should make a new one. Also, I didn't support it when it came out. So yeah. And the Japanese Nintendo Direct, there was the Pro Yaku Famitsu, or Famista? I don't know. Baseball, Namco baseball game. They're putting out a new baseball game from Namco. It looks pretty cute. It's fun because it has like a bunch of Namco characters in there. So there's like a Mappy looking dude in there. There's some baseball mascots in there too. The Valkyrie from, I forget what that game's called. The Namco's Valkyrie game. I don't know. But if you go look at the website, there's like a bunch of characters in baseball outfits. I think it's just something they've done in the past. I know it's like, I've seen pictures of like Cosmos in a baseball outfit before. But it looks cute. There's kind of like a overworld aspect to it where you run around town and things like that. Doubt I'll ever play this game, but I like that it exists. I don't think it'll come out here either, but hey, who knows? I love that Namco does a lot of really weird stuff with their IP sometimes. They're just like, here's this game that's just going to put all our Namco characters in baseball outfits because sure, why not? Which, it's fun. It's a fun little thing. And that's pretty much it for Nintendo Direct stuff. I think as for a mini, it was pretty solid. I think a mini does define it pretty well, though. Of just like, hey, no, not a lot of big new game announcements, just a lot of updates to other things. Pretty excited about Xenoblade Chronicles, mainly because, I'm interested to see what they do to that game. Like if it's going to be an extension of Xenoblade Chronicles gameplay mechanics, or if it's going to be a reinvention of it. Even if it's an extension, I'm happy to play new, like 20 hours of new content if it's like that, or if it's like similar to the scale of Torn or something like that. I'm happy to do that. It's been long enough since I played Xenoblade Chronicles that it won't kill me. And pretty late this week, there was the announcement of the NieR Remaster, which seems pretty vague on the details of exactly what it's going to be at this time. It sounds like they are going to be making some changes. They talk about potentially adding an ending, possibly. I don't know if that was just speculation or if it seemed like, I think the quote going around with Yoko Taro was just like he doesn't know what he's doing essentially at this point, which he may actually know, but that's just the kind of his style. He's gonna say these ridiculous answers that get like, PR, or not PR, but viral attraction of people, quoting him, talking about how he'll do things for money and stuff like that. It's just how he is. It's fine. It's a very distinct personality, at least. But yeah, so it seems like it's kind of up in the air of exactly what this thing's going to be. It sounds like it's probably leaning more towards being pretty faithful to the original game, but with added content, possibly. They did say they were going to re-record the voice acting, which I think is not really if you don't know, original NieR actually has really good voice acting that I think generally people agree upon. It's very good voice acting. But the problem being is that the version that we got in the US is NieR Gestalt, which features a older main character, where the Japanese version, or particularly NieR Replicant on the PS3 in Japan, featured a young boy, which is kind of the canon version of that game, I guess you could say. The old man thing was less so. So they're gonna have to probably re-record the voice acting to match the fact that you're not an old man anymore. You're a kid, because the localized US release would just had the old dude in all versions of the game. Which I'm a little sad, because I do love what I think a lot of people call Papa NieR, older NieR on there. But at the same time, that original game is there if you want to play Papa NieR. It's the young boy version never came out here, so it's cool that they're bringing that over. It'd be best if both characters were available in the game, but I understand. But that's probably why they have to re-record the voice acting to make it fit, essentially, or else you'll probably have people calling him old man or something like that, and it not making any sense. So yeah. I'm pretty happy this is coming out, because actually playing NieR is kind of a not hard thing to do, but it's not the cheapest game at this point. And, getting people to take out their 360s and PS3s can be a bit challenging this late. Those systems are getting pretty old now. I'm a little sad to see the online conversation around the game. At least, like, a lot what I saw when this stuff was coming out was the stuff I was seeing around the time of Nier Automata, of just like people being like, oh, great, a chance to fix that bad game. And I'm like, I'm very much somebody who tries to understand everybody's thoughts and opinions on games and try to come to some kind of conclusion about, like, hey, I don't understand this, but I see this. And it took me a long time to get there with Nier Automata, because if you don't know, I very much did not like Nier Automata. It was the most disappointing game to me in the last 5 years, probably. I can't think of a game that disappointed me more. Not because of the game itself, but because of what the original Nier was and what Automata turned out to be. And so a lot of the conversation around Automata coming around was like, oh, finally a NieR game with good gameplay is going to come because Platinum's making it. And I think the general opinion in terms of like Platinum fans is that NieR Automata is not a great Platinum game, but it's serviceable. It's like fine enough. And yeah, but I just like, to me, the original NieR is very much like a Zelda game in a lot of ways. And I think a very good Zelda game. It has a bunch of magic spell stuff that, Zelda lacks. And the dungeons are very diverse. They're all centered around particular gimmicks, but those gimmicks are very good at using, very minimalistic touches to kind of change how you play the game. Sometimes it comes down to, like, you have like a dungeon that's built around like bubble walls, so you have to do a lot of like juggling these bombs around in the dungeons. And then also there's like the dungeon where basically each room takes away different like button inputs and stuff while you're in the dungeon. It feels very much like this one indie game I remember playing a long time ago, like Tower of Heaven or something like that. But like each dungeon has its own unique gimmick. Like that would probably get annoying overall. Like if the entire game was like, hey, we're going to take controls away from you every room. But for one dungeon, I think it's like cool for that one dungeon kind of thing. And every dungeon feels unique, where Automata is pretty much the same thing throughout the entire game, in my opinion. So yeah, seeing people say that game needs to be fixed is a little jarring to me because I just have a hard time figuring out what needs to be fixed. I heard that the combat's fairly repetitive, but I would say that about Automata even more so probably, because that game is very mashy. But again, I'm not a Platinum expert, so maybe there's something I'm missing there. But I kind of view Platinum games as being very samey in a lot of ways. They definitely have their own unique touches and things like that. Like, I feel like every Platinum game has its kind of hook between, like, I think Metal Gear Rising plays pretty differently from Bayonetta, and Wonderful 101 plays differently from all those games. If anything, Wonderful 101 might be the most extensive offshoot I feel like that Platinum has done outside of, like, working on Star Fox or something like that. But I think it's very much like in the same way I view Pokemon, where it's like, hey, these games all look the same, but there's little differences here that make each of them unique. And Automata definitely has a lot of gimmicky stuff going on with its battle system in some ways. But a lot of that stuff was just kind of pulled from NieR. And so, if you didn't play NieR, I could see that being pretty exciting. But, after playing NieR, to see it be pulled not only one for one, but also being utilized in less smart ways, I feel like it was almost like a step back in a lot of ways. It didn't really impress me too much. That being said, like, I did finally get to the point where I felt pretty comfortable with NieR Automata and how people felt about it and understanding why people liked that game in terms of a lot of the storytelling stuff. I don't agree, but I feel like I understand why people like NieR Automata a lot better. Where I think the one thing I've always still struggled with is just knowing why people don't like the gameplay of the original NieR. It to me, it always seemed really good. But it's also, I will say it's a game that focuses less on quality and more on variety and uniqueness, and that's kind of stuff I like. Where I think typically people don't like that. So maybe the whole thing with the Automata thing is just, they layered on this Platinum combat system, polished it up slightly, not as good, but good enough. And that makes people happier because it's something that feels more consistent. Maybe, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking about this. NieR Remastered. I probably won't play you, but I'll keep an eye on what's going on with that game. At least, if they don't change it too much, if it's pretty much the same game, I will definitely point people to that if they want to play some NieR. If they do end up changing it quite a bit, I think I will, be a little reluctant to recommend it to people. I might check it out if they do it that way. I guess you might get a sale, but yeah, I don't know. Let's stop talking about NieR. NieR is a very complicated subject for me. And that's going to be it for this week. Oh, what a long podcast this week. But we had a lot of stuff to talk about. So yeah, in terms of content coming up, basically we're just in the normal churn period. I know usually for times like these I'd have little bits of smaller content coming out, so apologies on that. I haven't really found a lot of things that really fit that at the moment, so I haven't been doing it. And with, like, working from home and stuff like that, it's kind of been a bit weird. But I'm still doing the podcast every Monday, going up at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And then also, I'm streaming every Thursday at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. Pacific time. So nothing's coming out this week, but next week, the Atokadol video is finally coming out. So I'm very excited about that. I finished that. I feel really good about that video. I hope you end up liking it. I'd say the last couple of videos I've worked on, I felt a little more mixed on. So this one, I feel like I really nailed it. Hopefully you like it too. Yeah. And then at that point, I'm basically setting up the next, podcast I have, gonna see if we can try to coordinate a time the next week and a half here, and get that recorded. And then you'll see that probably in, early May or something like that. And hopefully I can get some smaller content set up, but at the very least, like I said, we had the Left Alive stream that's going on right now. Left Alive, I'm starting to really enjoy it. I was, if you watched that first stream, I was pretty negative on it initially, but I'm really starting to get a hang of what that game's expecting from me from a stealth perspective. I'm starting to really enjoy the characters. I don't really know what's going on story-wise right now, but that's fine. As long as it's good characters, I'm fine. But I am enjoying the gameplay quite a bit more. So if you watch the second stream, I think you'll get a better sense of how that game plays. Because I'm bad at stealth games, but I'm starting to figure out how to be okay at stealth in that game. Not a bad game, I don't feel like. I could be wrong, but I feel like Left Alive is perfectly serviceable as a stealth game. If anything, there's a lot of things I think is kind of fun in it. But yeah. And then, like I said, the Ningou Tsukai 2, Metal and Lace 2,
There's a stream for that went up about 30 minutes long. So if you want to check out a PC98 game running at slightly the wrong resolution, you can check that out. I'm not sure what the short term is going to look like for PC98 content at this point. I need to try out some of these other games, but a lot of them are like RPGs and stuff like that. So there's a good chance I'll put them in, be like, cool, this is a video game, and then shelf it forever. So yeah. Anyways, thank you again for coming. WongChillReport.com is the website. Also YouTube channel if you want to go there, like and subscribe, I guess, if you want. Make me feel good about myself. Yeah, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.